Hey, everybody, welcome back to Mind What Matters. I have got my co host, Nikki DeLoach, back with me today.
I'm
Hello.
back.
I
Hi,
have
honey.
missed you.
I have missed you too, although we did recently get to see each other, which was so nice. You
I
actually
know.
bookended my filming. So I went
Yep.
to do a movie, you guys, in Bulgaria and Greece. It'll be out later this summer. Um, and I saw Liz literally the day that I left. I was having so much anxiety about leaving when the world was in the chaos that it has been in and flying and all of that. And I think we were having a Mind What Matters event for caregivers in LA.
Yep.
And then I think I got to the airport and you were on the phone. I probably cried about 5 times that day, got on a plane, left and filmed my movie, and then came back to you, which
And
was
there I was.
it was so great. What a
Well,
bookend,
it's
Liz, to
always it's
see you.
always great when we can be in the same time zone, much less the same city. So it was too
It feels
short.
right. It
It,
feels
it
right when
does. It
that
just feels
happens.
right. We need to
Yeah.
work on this. It's not okay that we don't live in the
Well,
same place.
no.
Um, well, we have a lot to catch up on, but thank God you're back. I have now decided I don't know how the heck I ever did this podcast without you. Interviewing people by myself requires a whole other level of like attention that I've decided I no longer have. I mean, you got to be like on and you actually have to like
Yes.
pay attention and like keep
Yes.
asking questions. It's stressful. I love
Yeah,
having you back. I'm just
I
gonna, in fact,
love it.
I am just going to sit here today. I might like file my nails. I'll mute myself. Like, who
No.
knows what Liz will be doing today on the podcast, ladies and gentlemen. But Nikki's back. So, okay, we
And
should
we have
probably
an
we
amazing
do have a
guest.
guest. We have the best guest. We have the
Ugh.
like one of my most favorite people I've met in caregiving, honestly, in the
Yes.
last like 6 months. This guy is blowing up, you guys. In fact, when we were just talking right before like I actually started hitting record, I was harassing him because I was like, what the heck are you doing with your Instagram, buddy? Like it is
Wait,
going crazy. And
Liz,
he
I
is,
have a question.
yeah.
Cause I started following him the moment like he hit Instagram. Because of course you and I look for all caregivers and all things dementia,
Yep.
and then became
All the
obsessed with
really
him. I was like,
uplifting topics.
yeah, exactly. And trauma. I follow everyone who really deals with trauma. Um, it's like I always say, I'm the least fun party guest because I don't know how to do small talk. But if you want to talk about trauma or caregiving, I
Yeah.
am your girl.
Yep.
So
She is,
I was following
everyone.
him,
She
and then
is.
I reached out to him.
If you're contemplating your existence on Earth and you need some
I'm your
support
girl.
there, pull up next to Nikki. Yeah, yeah, that's who
Yeah.
you want. Okay, so you
But I
found him.
DM'd him. I DM'd him to say we would love to interview you on the podcast. And then and he finally got back to me. And then the next thing I knew, you were like, "Oh, I've already booked him." So did you find him as well? And you and I just had not spoken about that?
Yes, literally,
That's so
like
wild.
it is his Instagram is the first thing that I see every single time I open it up. Like
I
it
love
is
it.
hilarious. And this is a guy, by the way, guys,
Yeah,
that has been in
tell the
like,
audience.
okay, I'm gonna take off my glasses. So let me like read this bio so I can get rid of the old like granny glasses that I found in my downstairs basement bathroom. It's the only pair I've got left in the house, guys. Um, but I will. I'm gonna read a brief
I'm
synopsis
joining
about
you
him.
now. Hold on, ready? I
Oh,
found ones that look as
yay!
closest to you as possible.
Did you
So
really?
yeah, I was like, these look like Liz's. They're not. They're like,
It's amazing. Are you sure they're not mine? You biatch. You probably stole them at dinner.
probably.
Okay. So, guys, we've had Neal on before. This is Neal Shah we're talking to today, but Nikki had her panties in a big wad because she didn't get to talk to him too. So, and also I felt like I was on, do you remember that show from the 90s, like Supermarket Sweep, where like the people
Yes.
are like racing through the grocery store to get stuff? That's how I felt when I was first talking to him because there's so many things to address. Just if you took like the first 10 of his Instagram videos, all of them hit home. Like you have just like entered into the mind of a caregiver and you've somehow pulled out all of the deepest, darkest secrets that they're thinking. And I just was blown away. And there was so much to cover. There wasn't nearly enough time to do it all. So I think it's great that we're having him back anyways. But yeah, let me read a little bit about him again, just for those of you who have not listened before. Shame on you. Neal Shah is a former hedge fund manager turned social entrepreneur after deeply personal experiences with caregiving. He was motivated by creativity and humanitarian progress, and he co-founded and serves as CEO of CareYaya Health Technologies, which is a tech startup and applied research lab focused on enhancing care delivery. And guys, I'm going to put this in the bio because there's so much more about him. He's a genius. He's had a very long and illustrious career in finance. He's a lot smarter than you and I put together, including Nikki. And we are so thrilled to have him back. We are just going to keep up with the conversation where we picked off last week. Welcome, Neal.
Thanks, Liz. Thanks, Nikki. Thanks so much for having me, and thanks for the generous introduction. I really
Oh,
appreciate it.
stop.
I'm just a regular person that became a caregiver, and I think I am excited about the episode because I really want to figure out other ways to help caregivers. But thanks for the opportunity.
I just, I could cry listening to you say that. Number one, there's so many things. Number one, I find so many women in this field.
Yeah.
I don't find as many men. And
Mhm.
what I do know to be true is that it's going to take all of us to figure out the problems that we are facing as a society. And caregiving, dementia, Alzheimer's, those are two very big ones that we are staring down the barrel of. If we think that we have a big diagnosis of people with dementia, we have no idea what's coming, and we have a caregiving crisis. So to have, not just to have a male figure, but to have someone who was, I mean, you were running was it $250 million hedge fund?
Yeah.
And to pivot because your life was touched by cancer with your wife, right?
Yeah.
And then your grandfather had dementia.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
And to be touched because I see it all the time with women. This happened to Liz. It happened to me when I went through a life and death crisis with my son. At the same time, I was going through a life and death crisis with my father with dementia. My grandfather had vascular dementia. My life was forever changed on a cellular level because of it. And this became my reason I get up in the morning. What can I do? How can I get back? How can I make it better? But I just don't see as many men. So I have to, first of all, compliment you for being a man who was like, my whole life changed when I went through this and experienced it. Have you also experienced, like, what was that like? I'm sure Liz may have already asked you, or if she didn't, like, what was that moment where you went, I don't want to do that anymore. I want to do this now?
Yeah, I mean, and thanks, Nikki, for the great question, because I've wondered that myself too. Why aren't more men, kind of doing this? And I think that on a positive note, with the generations, it is starting to change. I think if you look at the statistics about the Gen Z and the millennial generation, which I would consider I'm kind of like the older end of millennial, a lot of people younger than me, and then Gen Z coming after, there are way more men stepping up into caregiving roles. I think just due to shifting societal expectations, I think something like 40% of Gen Z and millennial caregivers are men now, which is like
Wow, that's
shocking compared to
great.
Gen X, was really disproportionate. But I think to kind of take it back to a personal level, I think it's actually through my grandfather's dementia experience where I was like care coordinating, but really the full-time burden fell on my mom. And then through my wife's care experience where I was the primary caregiver and I ended up leaving my career to do it full-time. I think just, it wasn't just my own challenges, but it was all the years of being in support groups. It was like heartbreaking to see the people like that are dealing with it that don't have a lot of resources, that don't have a lot of support, who might not be lucky enough that mid-career they step away for a couple of years and then can just go back or go do something else. Like it was just like really, really heartbreaking. And I think it was eye-opening. I kind of would say prior to that of just like working in finance, you're almost like living a little bit more sheltered life where you don't see this like human impact. And after you've been in years of dementia caregiver support groups, cancer support groups, and you just realize what people are struggling with. So I think that was really the catalyst that I shut down my fund, done my wife's care for a couple of years. She finally had a successful outcome and was in remission. And I was thinking, okay, at that point, I'm 38. What do I want to do with the rest of my life? And, I kind of had the answer of like, this is what I want to really spend my time and energy and focus on. I think there's a huge impact that can be made. And I was surprised that other people weren't spending enough time on it. So yeah, that was kind of like, I'd say, and frankly, it's therapeutic. I mean, the caregiving experiences have been like deeply traumatic, and I find different people cope differently. But for me, it's like channeling the mental energy into doing something that can help other people is also a way for me to recover from my own, I guess grief and process loss. So yeah.
Boy, are you talking into the right ears. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
pretty much same and same,
Yeah.
both sides of you right now in this window.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that's sort of the name of the game. And I
Yeah.
I always tell people like if you're not doing something to make life better for somebody else who's going through the same thing that you are, then what are you doing? Because honestly, that's the only way through this is finding other people who are in it with you and helping, and that's why I think what you're doing is so phenomenal. So okay, tell us right now about more about CareYaya because we didn't spend a whole lot of time talking about that last time, but I don't want to like run over that because I think right now you're only in a few cities, but like that's going to grow, and I think it's a really phenomenal idea, just like the
It is.
platform of like how you're doing this. It's basically like Uber, but for caregivers, and you're getting really trained, like professional, even in healthcare students, right? Do I
Yeah,
remember
yeah.
that
So it's
correctly?
it's it's basically the workforce, so I thought it was like the best kept secret that some of the caregivers I ended up hiring through both my grandfather's care and my wife's care. We went through everything like home care agencies, finding people on care.com, et cetera. But I found healthcare students, nursing students and pre-medical students, they just had a heart and passion for the work where like they weren't in it really for the money, but for the experience and helping people. And I'd done it myself and I'd met so many caregivers and support groups that are doing it themselves, but it's a very informal market. You got to do a lot of legwork yourself. So the initial idea of CareYaya was how do I just make this easier, faster, and more vetted for people so they can get access on their own. So in a nutshell, we operate a now growing nationwide caregiving platform connecting over 50,000 nursing and pre-medical students at a little over 30 universities around the country to be caregivers of older adults in their community. And really, the people booking are usually the middle-aged sons and daughters. So, we charge nothing for the service, by the way. So we bear all the costs ourselves. Families book, schedule, vet, and then pay, and they pay, and all the money goes to the students. So I both wanted to kind of build a high quality care workforce so that would relieve the guilt. Because to be honest, I found one of the biggest pain points in caregiving was when you feel guilty that your loved one isn't getting good care, you ended up feeling obliged to do it yourself, which had happened to me several times in my own family, and which led my mom to quit her career, led me to, take care of my wife full time. And it was just like the caregivers were not that good, they were not that reliable, and you're like, okay, I'll just do it. Um, so I wanted to solve the quality issue. And I also wanted to solve the affordability issue because I think a lot of people cannot afford I
Mm-mm.
mean, the nationwide cost of home care now is pushing $40 to $45 an hour, and that prices a lot of people out. I think what you guys are doing with like your respite care programs and everything is awesome where you're able to like fund that for people. I also think from an innovation side, you just can actually just structurally lower the cost because when these companies are charging $45, they're certainly not paying the care worker 45, most of these care
Right.
No.
workers are being paid 15 to 20 across the country. I live in North Carolina, by the way. The average care worker in our state makes 12.50 an hour, but the average company charges 35. I mean, it's like absurd. So I think that big markup is resulting in both low quality care and unaffordable care. So if you could kind of just reduce that markup through innovation, then you could pay the care workers more, charge the families less. We obviously have an extreme position where we charge zero. So caregivers through CareYaya are being paid somewhere between 20 to 22, depending on what city, and the family is paying that directly to the student. So that's a win-win for both sides. So yeah, I really think that that's one of the biggest innovations that's needed. And I think if you scale that out, everybody that's complaining about caregiver shortage as well, like in our state of North Carolina, the caregiver shortage exists at 12.50 an hour. There's no caregiver shortage at $20 an hour. Everybody's willing to do the work, So I think that that is applicable nationwide, So I think the industry structure is broken.
I work on, I would say, our two most vulnerable groups of the population. I work in pediatrics and then
Mhm.
for caregivers in dementia work.
Yeah.
And what I have learned across the board in these last 10 years, being so intimately involved in, you know, working at Children's Hospital Los Angeles and then being on
Yeah.
the board for Mind What Matters and us having access to incredible doctors and brilliant minds that's doing so much work, is the system is so broken, and it is broken across the board. Like, we're concerned about the workforce pipeline, people even wanting to go into pediatric care or dementia care or caregiving or any of that. And mostly it is because we do have these middlemen like insurance companies or caregiving networks that are the middleman that are saying, oh yeah, we're going to charge you $5,000 a month for health
Yeah.
insurance.
Yeah.
And you can't access it. Or yes, it's $50 an hour for a caregiver, but that
Yeah.
caregiver who's doing the work is given 15 of that actual money.
Yeah.
So number one, I love that you are actually building a workforce pipeline. Can you share a little bit about how you have, like, what is your training program like? And how are you essentially creating, what does that new system look like where you have essentially taken out that middleman and
Sure.
you're kind of like we're placing money in people's pockets. You are placing caregivers in people's homes.
Yeah. Yeah, great question. So we developed our own training program. So actually, some of the cool things that CareYaya has done is beyond just mobilizing the care workforce, we've actually done a lot of grant-funded projects to improve care quality. So our training program developed through an initial grant that Johns Hopkins gave us. We built this AI program called the Yaya Guide, which is a AI-powered personalized caregiver training using bite-sized training videos, personalizing the content for the individual caregiver and what they know and the person that they're going to care for next. So that way you distill what otherwise would be 100 hours of certified nurse aid training into 2 to 3 minutes at a time, while you're brushing your teeth in the morning or in the afternoon between classes, and you kind of learn gradually. So we developed that and actually have scaled that across the student workforce. Last year, we won a big grant from NIH to now scale that to family caregivers. Product is completely free to use. So if anyone's interested, definitely reach out to me. But yeah, I think that is so. Sorry, long-winded answer to your question was that we built our own training because we felt that there was a training gap. We even in the
Yeah.
student side, I observed that certified nurse aid is the typical way student might get trained to go do any kind of care work. Unfortunately, that's inaccessible. Like in our state, the typical CNA programs cost $800 to $1,000. So a lot of students are like, well, if I'm a nursing student or a pre-medical student and I'm a junior in college, there's no way I'm going to fork over $1,000, so we had to kind of bridge that gap. On the technology side, I actually think so. So once we've standardized vetting, background checking, interviewing, getting the students referrals from professors, that's typically the way that our platform grows. Then, we put them through the training curriculum. Then we make them available on the site, almost like running an Uber-like technology on the background to intelligently match with families nearby who book. I think the cool thing about that, and I wrote an article about this, is that, the cost structure of the industry to do all this stuff manually is anywhere between $10 to $15 an hour. They're doing all this like pen and paper, and then the family's having to pay all that cost, and then the caregiver's getting less. So my two hypotheses in the innovation were, one, if I can figure out an intelligent way to build technology to significantly lower the cost structure, then more of the money would be passed through to the caregiver, not to the company. And then obviously the second hypothesis was to just massively collapse like the profit margin, which like we are just eating completely. But the industry has a double profit margin structure. If you think about it, most of these companies like Home Instead, Right at Home Care, Comfort Keepers, the local person makes a profit, but then they pay a royalty to the national, which also makes a profit. So I think the franchisee system has like a double take, if you will. And of my approximation was of whatever money you're paying for care, roughly $10 to $15 an hour is coming off the top to go for both sides profit. The second thing that I think is really interesting, just to the interest that, I'm an economics nerd, so I find this stuff interesting. Is that if you think about what the incentive of these companies, if you're like in LA or you're in Nashville and you're like the local person running Comfort Keepers, you have an incentive to profit maximize over maybe 200, 300 clients that you can get. So you're like, I need to charge X amount of rate, right? But if you're like running a national thing, you can run it like Costco. You're like, I don't need to max out the dollar profit, which is kind of, I would like to think of a good analogy. I love Costco.
It is.
It's like,
I
yeah.
am so impressed with Costco, how they run their
Nice.
business,
Okay,
how
that's awesome.
the founder, the CEO takes care of his employees, how he's like, I don't need to make $1 billion. I'd rather my employees be taken care of and be happy. And I'm like, he's like still makes so much money, and he's like my family's good, we don't need extra money. But just the thoughtfulness of how he has built that model, I'm like, how are we not essentially shaming other heads of
Yeah.
corporations into the same model?
Exactly. Like
Right.
that's our, kind of like compass, in terms of like we are trying to bring that attitude to caregiving, is that if you just go for like low, no markups, maximum, number of people you can serve, everyone in the ecosystem that you're thinking about. Because I do think like both it's the morally right thing to do, think about the caregiver. It's also actually just good business sense. Like
It
if
is.
you run an organization that's charging $50 an hour and you're paying the person 15, like at some point, it's not just like, oh, that's great for your short-term profit margin. It's also just like, what kind of care quality is going to happen
Mm-hmm.
when you're underpaying the person? What I found in my grandpa's care, which I later also learned in my wife's care, is some of these care workers, like, God bless them, like they didn't do a great job during the care, but who could blame them because they're
Right.
getting paid nothing. They're doing second shifts at the grocery store. Many of them are single mothers, and they have to provide for a couple of kids. And how are you going to do that in North Carolina on $12 an hour? It's like,
Right.
and on top of that, the work is really hard. So I think that the companies are foolishly making a short-term decision, which, I mean, I guess maybe not foolish because it's worked for them so long, but I don't think that's going to work forever,
I
because
agree.
it's
And
resulting in poor quality.
I think that we are at a crossroads in general where people are waking up
Yeah.
to the fact that any type of billionaire has gotten there because there has been exploitation,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? There has been
Yeah.
exploitation of the workforce. And I think we are at a turning point where society is finally waking up to that. And especially those generations that you were talking about, the younger
Yeah.
generations are like, no, 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 not on our watch. We're not buying into this anymore. And the answer is you don't have to like every year make $1 billion to
Yeah.
put in your bank account. It
Yeah.
is making sure that people get a living wage. And when you give them a living wage, they will do a better job at their job. They will be loyal to you. And you're also building something that everybody gets to participate in. And then also that whatever care is given or whatever services are given, you have clients that are going to be happy and they're going to return to you and stay loyal to you. So I love your business model. It's very
Yeah.
thoughtful. It's very conscientious. And I love that you are essentially figured out a way to save us single-handedly, Neal, from the collapse of our workforce pipeline in caregiving.
Yeah.
Like
Thanks.
it's honestly mind-blowing.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
The craziest thing is that like, and this is what I tell so many people because often, people are calling me when they're like, it's time to get help. And they're saying, okay, how do we do this? And what can I expect to pay? And whenever I tell families what the actual cost is of having outside care, the first thing that I hear is, you have to be kidding me.
Yeah.
Who can afford
Yeah.
that? Who can
Yeah.
afford that? And I mean, it truly never fails. And I think
Yeah.
so many people don't understand that, you move into independent living, maybe that's $5,000 or $6,000 a month. Okay. Well, then you have to move to assisted after that because maybe you need help, with just prompts that it's time to go down to dinner, or you need prompts to take a shower, or that it's time to take medicine, or that you actually need someone to give you medicine in order to be able to remember it. Well, that's like $7,000 to $8,000 a month. But on top of that, if you have Alzheimer's and dementia, you're going to require a caregiver that's with you during your waking hours so that you don't get agitated or upset or find yourself wandering in some big, assisted living facility on your own. And then there's the step to memory care. And a lot of people think that, oh, I'm done when I get to memory care. And that's maybe $13,000 a month in some of the biggest cities for the nice ones. Maybe it's more like $9,000 in secondary markets. But guess what? You're probably still paying for an outside caregiver,
Yeah.
even in memory care, unless you want, your loved one standing there picking at the carpet for 6 hours.
Yeah.
So I think when you start talking about numbers that are up into the close to $200,000 a year for some families, that
Correct.
Medicare in some cases will cover a piece of, in some cases it doesn't. Let's say, especially if something happens very quickly, like your loved one takes a spill and they get hurt, and maybe they just have an ER visit, but that ER visit, they don't even know to call a social worker to trigger a 3-night minimum or 3 midnight minimum stay. So Medicaid doesn't even reimburse for any part of a skilled nursing facility where they also need help. You are talking about a generation of families like mine and Nikki's and yours that are all in the same age group that are facing a couple $100,000 a year crisis, and they're trying to depend at the last minute on people that are basically working for a $10, $12 minimum wage, which go ask anyone who's actually done the work of caregiving for someone with a serious disease like Alzheimer's and dementia. If you can spend an hour with them, you're doing real good if you don't have training. And there were days with my mom, where she was literally following me so closely. It was like I had a shadow for 8 hours at a time. And it's exhausting. And it was exhausting even for the caregivers that were hired. They would often say to me, I don't know if I can walk anymore with your mom. All she's doing is walking and my legs are tired. Or, it's really hard to be with her for this long. And they didn't know what to do. They didn't even know, even if you have all the right training, it's still so mentally taxing to be with someone with Alzheimer's and dementia that, like, who wants to do that? Who wants to do that work for nothing? I mean, these are people who should honestly be getting paid as much as teachers, in my opinion, because they're doing as critical work for this country, and they're doing it every day, for absolutely nothing. And I think that's where what you're doing is so phenomenal. But what I'd like to pivot and talk about now is, what are the barriers to this? Because I called a friend of mine that was a lobbyist after you and I talked the last time. And I was like, what about this idea, of Mind What Matters, like actually starting this, advocacy group and trying to really rally the troops and see what we can do. And she's like, well, Liz, first of all, you're crazy. So she's like, you're a dreamer and you like to do good. You're a do-gooder. So, I mean, like, this is great for you. I would never take this on.
Really?
She's like, I mean, I think you're out of your mind, but she's like, good for you if you want. But she's very connected in Washington and here, big lobbyist. And she's like, but you're probably going to get killed. And I was like, what? And she's like, I'm serious. She goes, think about the money that you're going to be taking from these home health companies, which, Neal, you told me are all owned by private equity now, which just makes me want to vomit.
It's a mafia.
So, like, you start talking about taking money from them and the nursing homes and wherever, like, if we get money for this, it's going to have to come from somewhere else. So, like, she's like, literally, you're going to wake up and be dead in your house one day. And I'm going to be like, I know how it happened.
I have some ideas on that. Well, okay. So one, it depends on what the ask is. Let's say in one case, it benefits the whole industry if, like, and there's a bunch of different asks. One could just be, why does Medicare not cover home-based care, what they call custodial care? Like,
that was one of my
everybody wins
questions.
on that. Like home care wins, CareYaya wins. I mean, anyone would win. Even family caregivers that are hiring people in the informal market win. And at a maximum level, family caregivers of backgrounds where the family's doing it themselves, they can get paid. Like, why is there no coverage? Like, it's like a mystery when you're outside looking in. And nowadays they're paying for all these dementia drugs,
I was just going to say $35,000 for a dementia drug, but zero when it comes to caregiving.
Yeah.
And also, why have we, because I always say, like, to run for politics, to want to be president, there's like all of those things, like, there also has to be a little something wrong with you, because there's so many people that get into it with such good intentions and then it just goes so sideways. But I put the onus on people, on us, the voters. We are actually the ones that are doing this to ourselves. So
did you just say the onus or the anus?
Yes. The onus, like we have to own as people. We keep giving our power away and saying, well, Congress and this and that. No, we're voting for this.
No,
we are actually voting for this.
Thank you for saying that. Because you know what? This is the perfect opportunity. Like, okay, if you guys want to do this, I would be happy to do this with you. Because I've been asking people who wants to do this, but I can't do it by myself. But midterm elections are coming up.
Yes,
I'm not like a very political person. I'm kind of like apathetic, to be totally honest. I'm just not paying attention. Boy. But here's the thing. I think I've read all the research that caregiving is a bipartisan issue, that Johns Hopkins put this thing out that 81% of Republicans and 83% of Democrats, something like that, the numbers are very close, neck and neck, of voters, self-identified voters of parties want more caregiving support. So how about this? You just roll into the next few months every town hall, every contested seat, every congressperson, House of Representatives, Senate seat, whatever the seat is, somebody's doing debates and town halls, and you just ask them, okay, and what's your plan on caregiving? And just start kind of building a momentum and narrative. I think you can force the issue in the midterm election, because if you think about it, a politician, like, very cynically, why I'm apathetic about politics is I just feel like, to your point, Nikki, the people that are in this field are not setting an example for any of us to kind of, follow. So that's kind of like a dark side of politics. But what if we can just shame them all to addressing the topic? And then if you think about politicians as opportunists, some of them will see, oh, wow, here's a big issue a lot of people care about. If I haven't already started talking about it, maybe I should. And then out of their own self-interest to win the election, they will start, talking about caregiving. And then maybe that's how the change actually happens. But I think how big the voter base is, that, like, look, 60 million caregivers are out there. How many people are taking care of mom, dad, spouse? If any of these politicians wake up and they realize, hey, maybe I should say my whole campaign is Medicare to cover caregiving. Can you imagine? Everyone's going to vote for that person. So maybe this is a good time for midterms, is that we just start pushing and asking. And I think
Can
that
I ask you a question, though? Hang
Sure.
on. I have to ask this first.
Sure.
So I just tried to do this. There's a lady by the name of Marsha Blackburn. She's like a shoo-in to be our next senator, I'm pretty sure.
Which, by the way, like, I am deeply political, Neal, because what I learned as a 22-year-old is there is nothing in our lives that is not political. So I started working on campaigns and legislation at 22 years old.
Oh, wow.
And I've been doing it for over two decades.
Wow.
So I reached out to someone who I know is having a big party for her, like in a couple weeks or something. It might even be this week. I don't know. But literally my only way of, quote unquote, getting connected with her.
Yeah.
Because, this is somebody who's going to be in our state Senate. And they told me, they're like, you should probably start at the state level first, like meet some people there and then, whatever. So she's like the person to meet if she's going to be senator.
Uh-huh.
And I think the price to just attend this event was like $2,000 per person. And I was like, I'm not doing that. I'm not going to pay $2,000 to stand at a cocktail party to try and catch her coattails at the end of an event to introduce myself and tell her what I'm doing. Like, that makes me want to fall on my sword.
Well, that's what I think the big companies do. But I think there's other ways. I think you could approach it grassroots, like you mobilize individual people and then you show up to town halls and like kind of open gatherings. I mean, you're right, Liz. Like, I think if you're like United Healthcare, you probably do that strategy, right? You donate 10,000 and show up and schmooze with them, which is, I think, the privilege of some of these big companies and what they're doing. But I think political action can happen the other way too, where if you just mobilize a bunch of caregivers who show up at the next, I mean, if she's already guaranteed to win, then, you don't bother on that race. But if there's another race of like a House of Representatives in Nashville, somebody's running, and then at the town hall, the two candidates are discussing something, and then you and like 10 other caregivers show up and start asking about, I feel like there's other ways to creatively do it that is more like ground driven and not money driven. Because I think ultimately that's how the change can happen. But obviously it requires a lot of coordination and planning. But I do think it's possible because of just how large the population is. Like how many caregivers are out there? And
we have access to caregivers in 42 states, Nikki, right? Like we could actually do this.
No, we absolutely could do it. And like I said, so much of it is legislation. But here is why I say this is a people problem. People like Marsha Blackburn are going to Marsha Blackburn all over the place. She has voted consistently to repeal the Affordable Care Act, kicking millions of people off their health care. And also millions of kids off SNAP, millions of people off Medicaid. She is not supportive of any social system that helps to support anyone. So Tennessee is going to suffer on that whenever it is a state that really needs that money and that help right now. So like we are the ones, they are voting for that is my point. You will never get anywhere with her on caregiving, just like we've never gotten anywhere on guns because the lobbyists are filling their pockets with money to not vote for their people, not vote for their constituents. So what you actually have to do as a voter is look at someone's voting record, look at at their record, look at what they've supported, look at who they've supported, look at what they've voted for, and be like, actually, you know what? I don't care if you're a Democrat or Republican. You voted against something that I really care about, which is having health insurance or making sure that caregivers can get benefits for the caregiving services that they are getting. And you voted against that. You don't support that. I'm not voting for you. I might be a Republican, but I'm not going to vote for you. I'm going to actually find somebody else that I can throw my weight behind, support behind. I think people have just gotten into this place where they're like, well, I'm a Republican, so I'm going to vote Republican.
Yeah.
I'm a Democrat, I'm going to vote Democrat, and not even considering the integrity of the person that they are voting for, and if they will actually go to Washington and fight for them. And that's where we've gone wrong, and why I want to advocate in this moment, why I think it's important, because it tells you everything you need to know about why Medicare will cover $35 for a dementia drug that has less than a 20% efficacy. Okay? But they won't shed a dime for home caregivers. It's because drug companies are lining their pockets with money.
That's it.
But
That's it right there.
caregiving, we
right.
don't have the money to do that because we are just like Neal was trying to build. So like what I'm encouraging people to do in this conversation is like, if you are inside of this with dementia and Alzheimer's or with caregiving or any of those things, educate yourself, learn about it, listen to these conversations. And really don't just dismiss because somebody is saying something that you might not like. Go into any given conversation or anything that you read with the mind of, I have to learn. I have to learn. I have to figure this out because we can do better than what we are doing. And so that's why I just wanted to get on a little bit of a soapbox about it, Neal, because yes, there's many people like you with hearts of gold and like me and Liz who are like, you know what? We're not getting that help from the government, but we're going to do it anyway. We're going to raise the money. But what could we do if we actually were able to get that help from the government, which is the whole point of a government? That is the whole point of having
you're
one.
1,000% right. And also, I don't know if anyone's mentioned this, but Nikki, have you thought about you should go into politics yourself because you have like a passion of the delivery, that I feel like,
it's almost like she's an actress.
Liz and I have interests, but we don't have that type of delivery, and I think
I've only
that's
been
what
told
it
by
takes.
like 20 people.
Yeah, I think that like your comments over the last couple of minutes, I could just see that if you're like on a stage somewhere and you're giving that speech, like a bunch of caregivers would mobilize and then they would show up to vote. And they would tell their friends. But like,
I care
have
so
you thought
much
about
about
like going
people.
into because I feel like another solve is instead of asking these existing politicians to do it, is just people go into it that are actually like, look, I'm just going to make the change, and you almost like run like a single issue candidate. Like, this is all I'm going to talk about. I feel like you could actually like win.
Do you remember where we started at the beginning of this conversation, which is who would want to do that in today's world? Like, who would want to go get involved with those
you
people?
got to change the world somewhere.
By the way,
right?
I am just crazy enough to do something like that. But I do think it is going to take, Neal, a bunch of me's. And I do support this organization that helps to get moms elected, everyday moms, like that were teachers, were nurses, were this, and they have children and they are getting elected all over the country. Why? Because of their authenticity of caring for humanity. The patriarchy protects power. Matriarchy prioritizes children and the most vulnerable.
Yeah.
So we need more female voices inside of the system because they are going to protect the future. They are going to protect the most vulnerable. That's why I said you are such an anomaly in my experience, and I applaud you for that. I wanted to really quick pivot into, I have one last, question in terms of the caregiving crisis. I have a million questions for you, but so dementia care spending is projected to hit over 380 million. And that was in 2025. We're in 2026. And then approach about 1 trillion for 2050, right?
Yeah.
What part, where does the system break first? Is it at the families, the workforce, the government? And also, why, as a group of people, do you think that we have gotten so comfortable with the upside down math of all of this? So I think it's a two-parter. Like, where do we break first?
Sure.
Is it the caregivers? Is it the families? And then also, Why have we gotten so comfortable with the upside down math, and how do we change that?
Okay, yeah, great question. I'd say complex answer, but one, I think it's going to break at the family level, and really it's going to break at the, I think, mostly middle-aged population, the daughters and the sons. I think that is going to absolutely break, and I don't think this is even a 10-year thing. I think it's going to break in the next 3 to 5 years. So I'll give you statistics on I live in North Carolina, and what's in our state. By 2030, so we're in 2026, by 2030, the number of people living with dementia in our state is expected to go up between 60 to 70%. So it's already a very large population and it's going to skyrocket. There's already a workforce shortage. And frankly, when we talk about care and care help, you got to keep in mind the vast majority of people can't even afford anything. So they're just doing it themselves. And it's the sons and daughters doing it. So I think it's interesting to think about that as the dementia rates rise so fast, how many middle-aged daughters and sons are going to quit their job and take care of mom and dad by
Oh
themselves?
my gosh.
I think that that very few people are, and by the way, it's also partly demographics. So if you think about why is dementia rising so fast, it's the baby boomers are the large population cohort. It was 1946, right, post World War II. The oldest of them just hit 80 because we're in 2026. And if you live long enough to 80 or more, you have a 33% chance of getting dementia. So you have a rapidly aging population where all of these people are going to hit 80 over the next 3 to 5 years, and many of them are going to get dementia. On top of that, social isolation and loneliness triples the odds of getting dementia. And we just went through a pandemic and 4 or 5 years where a lot of older people kind of self-protected and were isolated because of that reason. So many of them are now having like changes in brain health from these years of isolation. And then the third thing is from COVID infections, even people who got mild COVID and recovered, there's signs of neuroinflammation 1 or 2 years later that are very similar to Alzheimer's dementia. So you have like a triple whammy of like how fast dementia is growing across the country. And on top of that, the other, so that's one, I think just the problem, it's going to hit middle-aged people. Where's the biggest gap I see is family caregivers receive minimal to no support. Like, and you guys probably have seen this too, but for most of the people who are getting diagnosed, like at least in our state, it's like you get the diagnosis at the neurologist and here's a pamphlet. Like, deal with it yourself. Like no one is getting anything, and I think that is a double or triple disaster in terms of you're like, what am I going to do? I'm going to go home and Google some stuff or go on YouTube, right? Which is kind of why we're building this caregiver training app where we're trying to help people. But nonetheless, there's still a massive shortage of resources. And what happens then is you as an average person, if you're not a clinical background person, and you're like 55 years old, you're suddenly now going to be a nurse and a doctor and a social worker and a pharmacist all in one for your loved one. And chances are you're probably going to get a lot of things wrong. So that's going to have a second order impact on your loved one's going to end up in the ER more than they need, end up with more falls, more accidents, and you yourself are going to have way more stress than if you had any kind of support and even modest amount of training and guidance. So yeah, I think that this is going to be a big crisis on really the middle-aged kind of, I'd say, millennial Gen Z population.
Yeah.
So and we need to get ahead of it because the practical thing is all these people are going to quit their jobs. So there's going to be a workforce challenge, second order. What are we going to do after mom and dad passes away? Some people cannot re-enter the workforce if they've been out of it for a while.
Right.
So yeah, I think we're going to have a major crisis, and we need to kind of plan ahead.
And it's also, by the way, not one anyone's talking about,
Yeah.
which is to me what is just so crazy.
It's
Because if
crazy.
you've been through this and you know what it feels like, I just made like some comment on somebody's Instagram literally last night. Nikki, I sent you the screenshot of it because probably shouldn't have done it. But like it was somebody who's like kind of famous and they're like, complaining, oh, I just had to spend a whole week at the hospital with my mom and it was horrible. I'm sure it was. I'm sure you were sleep deprived. I'm sure it was miserable. But like a week? Are you kidding? Why don't you try 9 years like that and then talk about how miserable you are?
Yeah.
And the truth is, that's what it is. For most people, and I didn't know it was 80. I thought it was 1 in 3 over the age of 65 will get some form of dementia. So like, if you think about those numbers, it really is like, look to your left, look to your right, 1 out of 3 of you.
Yeah.
And if you consider the way in which it like typically happens, no one's planning for Alzheimer's or dementia, and it doesn't come knocking on the door and just like announce itself. It happens very gradually, oftentimes in closed doors in a home where nobody's paying attention, or a parent's living by themselves, and all of a sudden someone comes home for Christmas and they're like, whoa,
Yeah.
what's happening? And you're dealing with like a crisis on your hands.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
that's not a point in time in which people think they're ever going to be in until
Yep.
they're just there. They're
Yeah.
in it. And oh, by the way, we're laughing about these, I'm getting paid $12 an hour caregivers. Well, guess what? You're not finding them when you need them, because it is one of the hard, at least in Nashville, like I know so many families right now who are calling me
Everywhere.
being like, hey, do you know somebody? Because I
Yeah.
can't seem
Everywhere.
to find anybody.
Yeah.
And it's the common thread that, every city is dealing with this. This is a
Yep.
major city. So can you imagine like some small town in the middle of nowhere? Like the help's just not there. It's already not there. So when we increase the number of patients with this disease,
Yeah.
and also we decrease the number of caregivers who want to do the job, just by the very nature of everything we've talked about today on how little they're getting paid. I mean, I'd rather go sling fries at McDonald's. I don't know about you, but like
Yes,
that
you're right.
seems a lot more appealing than wiping somebody's ass
And
that
it
I
pays
don't
better.
know.
It pays better.
And
It
you
pays
probably
better.
get
Yeah.
probably get benefits and
Yep.
vacation time and
Yeah.
everything else, instead of like an angry daughter that's calling you, where were you? You were supposed to be here at 9:30 for my hair appointment. I mean, like,
Yeah.
it sounds miserable, and I think, like I said, until we start paying these people, it's supply and demand at its finest. If we're going to go nerdy econ, like I was a business major too, like that's what it is. And until we make this a job that people actually like are in any way incentivized to do, we're going to have a labor shortage for sure.
And Liz, I think great points. And I'll add a couple of things additional to that is if you think about the generations and how many people are in each generation, the baby boom was a huge explosion in births.
Mhm.
After the baby boom, there was a structured baby bust. So, you had a 15-year period in society of 1945 to 1960 where there were so many births. Then you had a bust of like not that many births for a variety of reasons of just like people delaying marriage and then birth control and things like that. So you have like a smaller base of middle-aged people that would normally take care of this aging population. That's one
Mhm.
thing to think about. So structural trend in society is all these people grow older, they need more care. The number of middle-aged and younger people in society is much smaller to care for them. And then on top of that, think about the immigration trend. A lot of the care workforce was being supplemented by people coming into the country. In many of the geographies, if you look at Texas, if you look at California, something like 30 to sometimes 40% of the care workers are relatively recent immigrants, because this is like a pathway to them getting work, and then maybe they'll go on and do something else.
100%.
So you are totally cutting that pipeline off. And in fact, many
Totally.
people are going back. So like, it's not like we're going to magically produce more caregivers, in the country. So I think it's going to be a massive like structural labor shortage, that may not only just continue, but I think likely get worse as the demand goes up and the supply is going down at the same time. So yeah, it's going to be
Well,
be really
guys,
sad.
I think it's very clear after hearing all of this today what it is we need to do. And, that is, you're screwed,
Nikki
basically.
for Congress. That's what.
And
No, that's like
also,
seriously,
and
'cause, like, we don't
also,
have time. We don't have time to wait around
well,
asking
here's
these
what
current
Nikki
people,
for
please do
president.
something. Yeah.
Here's
Yeah.
what I can't. I could only tell the truth, and so that's where I would get myself in trouble all the time. I would love to end on a caregiving question, because you do so much with helping to advocate and advise caregivers. Research shows that dementia caregivers, they're 30% more likely to smoke, 27% more likely to develop hypertension. Nearly 60% will have, at least one modifiable risk factor, which increases their chances of developing dementia. So what is the thing that no one tells caregivers about how to protect themselves?
Oh man, that's like a
Yeah,
really, really tough question.
I know. Because it's so
Okay.
nuanced.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. I can give a quirky answer while I think of a better answer. So
No,
the
give
quirky
whatever
answer would
answer you
be
can.
okay. Quirky answer would be dancing. There is a lot
Yes.
of research. Yeah, there's a lot of research suggesting that out of like 15 activities that they
Yes.
measured, dance had the absolute strongest impact on reducing your own risk and just like improving brain health and just overall mood. And even it's kind of like have you ever heard like even just like fake smiling? If you do it you just kind of feel better, and then over time it becomes real. Same, I think, with like dancing. Like if people are just kind of like, whether it's on their own or going into a structured group class or anything, it's kind of a quirky answer, but nonetheless, the data really proved it out that find ways to kind of just do things. And I think that self-reinforces and becomes positive and makes you just kind of like happy. So I think anyone can kind of do that in the comfort of their home, when they're washing the
Yes.
dishes or whatever. So
I
that's
have
kind of like
videos.
yeah,
I have videos to send you.
nice. That's
Though
awesome.
when I was going through the crisis with
Please
both my son
don't. Please
and
don't
my
do that.
dad,
I like
Yeah,
him, Nikki.
when I was going through the crisis with both my dad and my
yeah.
son at the same time,
Okay.
my word for that year, I pick a word for each year. My word for that year was dance.
Wow, that's
I was a
awesome.
dancer for 20
That's
years, but
awesome.
also I knew that I was going to have to find time every day to just dance, to put music on, even if it's 10 minutes. And it is what saved my life. And then also every 2 years, I do this event called the Dance to End Alls. And it is
Wow.
3 hours of
Yeah.
just music and dancing. And the reason why is
Nice.
because of all the research that you just shared right there
Yeah.
of how beneficial dancing is, not just for your mind and your body and your heart and all those things, but it is so beneficial to your whimsy. And and when you are doing really hard things, helping you to get through really hard things. So I love that.
That's awesome.
Whimsy and opus. I'm just finished for the
I
day.
said onus,
It's
onus.
vocabulary words. Yeah.
So,
Very cool.
guys, follow Neal. Believe me, he is an absolute dictionary and thesaurus of advice for caregiving, for people living with dementia and Alzheimer's. The work you do with the pipeline for caregivers. I mean, you are single-handedly saving our workforce pipeline. And also, dance more, right?
Yes, 100%.
And fake smile.
Yes, it works. It makes you positive. Yeah. I know it's hard, but yeah, try to find ways to get positive in an otherwise difficult situation,
And
there is light at the
also,
end of the tunnel.
we said this before. I said it before. Go help somebody else. Like, honestly, it's the only way through. It is truly, like, in my opinion, it was not until I started this podcast and then the nonprofit that I felt any sort of relief at all from caregiving. I'd been taking
True.
care of my mom for 13 years. And it was the first thing that it didn't cure me. It didn't like immediately magically pull me out of my burnout and depression. Well, I don't know if I had depression, but it definitely was burnout. But like nothing helped until that moment. I just was so lost and tired and not myself. And the minute I found connectivity with others and the minute I started listening to other people's stories and then helping them through their own, it changed everything. It truly changed not just how I ran the rest of the gamut of my mom's disease progression and how I existed within the constraints of like everything that was going on. But it also changed how I was as a caregiver. I became such a better one because when you don't know what you're doing, that's when the burnout happens. It's when you're constantly struggling around in the dark, not knowing, okay, what am I supposed to do if this happens? And what if that happens? And there's nobody that you can call, there's no neurologist that has call me in the middle of the night, nurse line or something that lets you know what to do the first time your loved one sneaks out in the middle of the night and you don't know where they are. Or maybe they become violent with you. The only person you're talking to is probably a local fireman that gets, the 911 call. So I think the really like biggest relief valve I think that you can find, guys, if you're listening and you are really in it, is go get on Instagram. Definitely look at Neal's page and hit like and subscribe and all the things, because you will find yourself suddenly an expert in caregiving overnight. I mean, his videos are just, like I said at the beginning of this, so real and so relatable. Every single thing that you talk about, like I said at the beginning, is just like, it's like been inside my brain at one point or another as a caregiver. I mean, every time you
Yes.
post a new one, I'm like, oh, yep, I remember the day I was dealing with that, or I remember exactly what I was feeling in that moment. It takes me like right back to it. So listen to him, but then guys, go find like 25 other people that are around your age, that are on the gram, that are dealing with the same thing. Put dementia in, the search box with the pound sign, or Alzheimer's, or just caregiving. I promise you, you are not alone in going through this. I mean, I would have never never met Nikki had I not DM'd her. So don't be shy. DM some stranger. Say, hey, I'm going through the same thing. Could we get on the phone sometime and just talk? Because it just makes all the difference in the world with how you get through it. You don't have to do it alone anymore. I mean, people in the 90s, 2000s, before the internet, it was way more isolating than it is today, but that is just not the case. You don't have an excuse anymore to not find connection. And who knows, you might just find a really obnoxiously annoying podcast co-host in the process who's going to run for president one day.
Yeah.
Caregivers get whatever they want. That's my platform.
Seriously,
That's a good platform. You could win on that platform.
Caregivers and
100%.
teachers and nurses,
Yes, exactly.
everything they want.
Nikki for vice president. I don't know. Probably Benny, your son, for vice president. And then Neal, you got to be in like CFO.
I'll be an advisor or something.
Whoever runs the finances for the government should have you in charge instead of whoever, whatever assets doing it currently. But it's really been a pleasure having you back. We're really grateful that you came back to spend time with us today.
Yeah, thank you for agreeing to do part 2, because I really was sad that I did not get to be on part 1, because I have been wanting to talk to you for such a long time. And of course, my brilliant partner had already reached out to you. Thank you for everything you do. Thank you for taking time with us today. And go with God.
Thanks so much for having me, guys. Thanks, Nikki. Thanks, Liz. This was really fun. Thanks so much. And thanks for the work you guys are doing to advocate for caregivers. It's really awesome.
Thanks, Neal. Till next time, guys.